Aisling said, I've seen her at the start of her campaign with her mum a while back, and I've seen it go from just a girl talking about water to the girl against fluoride has been all over the media. I don't know if you know the hot press has done the last 6 issues. The mainstream media is starting to tackle this issue, and it's quite, for me, it's just incredible to see just one ordinary person who's such a powerful force for change in such a short time. And for that, you know, she has my respect and appreciation. So please put your hands together for Aisling FitzGibbon.
Hello, I'm Aisling FitzGibbon. I also go by the name of the Girl Against Fluoride. So, who am I? I am Aisling and I'm from Kerry. I'm 26 years old. And when I was 19 in college, I became really sick with depression. And I eventually ended up going to a doctor who said I had depression and, you know, gave me antidepressants and that was it kind of thing. And I didn't really feel very well and I was deteriorating all the time to the point where I couldn't go on anymore. Now, I'm a qualified occupational therapist, so at the end of my degree, I really just thought, I don't really have a future. I had a first class honours and it meant nothing to me because I actually had no energy to even apply for a job. So I ended up going to a nutritionist in the UK, and one of the first things she said to me was, are you aware that there's fluoride in your drinking water in the south of Ireland? And I wasn't. I thought it was only in toothpaste. And she told me that fluoride can reduce your thyroid function, amongst other things, but mainly this can cause very, very bad depression and fatigue. So she said, stop using it, which I did. I came off all medication, and within 7 months I was fully better. So, long story short anyway, I became the Girl Against Fluoride last year, based on the fact that the lady who runs the college in England, who I went to, she came over and she said, if you do anything for this country, you have to get this out of the water. And what I have discovered, what I'll talk about, has been truly horrific alongside what the banks are doing. It really is like, you know, diving into the rabbit hole and finding out. So the Girl Against Fluoride was born very young, since August of 2012, so she's quite young. She's a little girl really, you know, she's got cape, she's very girly, because the whole issue is very serious and, you know, frightening for people to hear. So we created this superhero character, myself and my mom, who's in the audience there, and we said, we'll make her do crazy stunts, because nobody just wants people going on, fluoride's bad for you, fluoride kills you, fluoride causes cancer. They're like, yeah, whatever, I don't believe you, I'm drinking water, I'm fine. So we thought, okay, we're going to have to do something really creative. We saw other campaigns in the past, and they fizzled out, or, you know, they didn't get through, they didn't gain enough momentum. So the whole idea behind this is to basically galvanise the country and to get people behind us aware of the issue. Who is this girl against fluoride? Why is she stripping off? You know, just basically to try and engage. So the whole thing with our water, I thought it was fluoride, you know, pharmaceutical grade fluoride you would imagine. But we actually have added to our water treatment plant, hydrofluoridic acid, which not only has fluoride, but also has other contaminants like lead, aluminium, mercury, cadmium, and uranium, which you really don't want going next or near your body. It has been known for a long time, since the 1940s, that it is a waste product of the fertiliser industry. However, the Irish government claimed to us that they specially manufacture it for our teeth in Spain. That's how lucky we are. Yeah. And in its raw form, when it's brought into the water treatment plant, it's actually so corrosive that it will eat through stainless steel and concrete, but it's good for your teeth. So yeah, it's been in our water. It'll be 50 years next year. So it came out under this Health Act, Health Fluoridation of Water Supplies, in the 1960s, and that was challenged by Gladys Ryan, who took a case which ended up in the Supreme Court in 1963. Unfortunately, didn't succeed. So we've had it here now 50 years, and there was actually a survey conducted in 2001, and 89% of people actually voted no against fluoride. And again, this seems to be coming up an awful lot, but again, the government, the health department, override anyone's objections. So, in almost 50 years, they have never once tested fluoride to be safe for our health. So there's no toxicological data in existence, even though they'll brandish it around that it's safe and effective. But but there's no tests that exist. And we are in the minority here in Europe in terms of 98% of the other countries are not adding it to their water supply. So we have us in the Republic, 10% the UK, and the Basque region in Spain. In Holland, actually, just give you an example of what other countries have done, that in 1976 they actually banned it and put it into their constitution that they would never reintroduce it again. So, you know, we really are behind here, and the fact that our neighbours in Northern Ireland, it's quite interesting to see the health statistics between the two, which I'll talk about later. So the Department of Health in 2004, they set up this Irish expert body on fluorides and health, and these really are a propaganda device. You know, they keep saying it's good for your teeth. They dismiss any scientific evidence. Any scientist that comes out against this, they will disregard and ridicule and, you know, make out that person is inadequate. So this is the way it's going, and they're costing a lot of money to the taxpayer every year, this expert group, and they meet. They were meeting like 4 times a year. They do put their minutes up online, but they haven't actually met in the past year or 2 years nearly. And then we look at data from the World Health Organization. I don't know if you can currently see this, but this is a graph that was made up. It's coming from the World Health Organization, and that was in 2012. That came out anyway, showing that in Ireland actually had the worst teeth in Europe, despite the fact that we're the only country to have this mandatory policy of fluoridation. So the whole argument behind putting this in the water really is quite inadequate. Last year, there's an environmental scientist who's been researching the fluoride in Ireland, and he was horrified. Last summer he contacted us saying, "It's going to be out in the morning, this is it, I found the key information, once they find out this, they'll definitely get it out." He found that hydrofluoric acid was banned in the EU due to lack of toxicological data in 2006. So they were using it, you see, as a biocide, a pesticide, but they looked to the company who was supplying these chemicals for their toxicological data, and they didn't supply anything, so it had to be put on this banned list. So we have an unauthorised biocide in our drinking water, but obviously it's good for your teeth. And Dr. James Riley, yeah, we have a lot of interesting letters. I'm sure Aidan Killian has had contact with this guy. Yeah, he's a staunch advocate for fluoride, again, supporting the words of the expert body. But I don't think that he's a good role model, to be honest, for him. And on an international level, the whole fluoride fight is a global issue. There is a fantastic network, Fluoride Action Network, and you can find them on fluoridealert.org. I'd recommend if you meet anyone who goes, "Oh yeah, whatever, I don't believe what you're saying, it's nonsense," they're only all, you know, cranks and conspiracy theorists. If you go on here, this is the best database in the world. If you go on to Fluoride Alert, if you spend 2 hours on this, you will be absolutely horrified. You couldn't possibly think that fluoride was any bit to do with your teeth. And it's made up of a board of toxicologists, people in medicine, chemistry, preventive dentistry, you know, all very highly esteemed people that are calling for an end to fluoride. So the whole thing is this myth that fluoride is good for your teeth, you know, and I think that's perpetuated by the fact that it's in your toothpaste you find in every shop. But if you look into the history of it, it really is very sinister, and there was fantastic work done by an investigative journalist, Christopher Bryson, who in the 90s, he put out a book called The Fluoride Deception, and he spent 10 years researching the history behind fluoride and, you know, the web of deceit surrounding this issue. And it really is like a tale, it's like a horror film. You would not even imagine it to be real, but it really is incredibly real, and it really is a matter of industry paying for their own research institutes to be set up to get their scientists to come out with fluoride's good for your teeth, so that they could dispose of their toxic industrial waste. And that's the kind of crux of it. And again, it's not only just people in science, it's also the civil servants, it's all the people that are in, as you know, water treatment plants. It's been carried out, this scam, this act of poisoning people is being perpetuated the whole time by people's inaction. And again, the HSC continue to advocate for it, but yet if you ask them for tests, they can't produce any. And then not long ago they were saying it's good to smoke. I remember my grandfather was recommended to smoke, and he ended up getting a grapefruit-sized tumour in his lung. So again, you know, who's paying for the information? You always have to ask yourself that question. Scientists that have spoken out, I said that they have been ridiculed and discredited. And again, there was a fantastic toxicologist from the States, Dr. FitzGibbon, and she spoke out against fluoride because she was testing it on rats. She was doing animal experiments. And what she found out was truly horrific. This is all documented in the Fluoride Deception, so if any of you want to do any further reading, I'd recommend that. She found when rats were given fluoridated water, they were having symptoms of ADHD and autism and cognitive defects, and she was so horrified she ended up continuing, testing more rats to see if we should get the same study. So she ended up sacrificing 500 rats, and the same thing kept coming out. And again, she spoke out. She exposed her findings to the scientists in the American communities, and they all turned against her. They didn't want to know, and her funding then was withdrawn, and she never worked in academia again. And this seems to be the case with whistleblowing scientists. They do trying to destroy their careers, but luckily, more and more people are braving it. And we have our fantastic guy from Cork, his name is Declan Waugh. If any of you are on Facebook, he's always posting. He basically knew nothing about fluoride 2 years ago, and it was through his friend persisting that he looked into it that he decided to spend a weekend reviewing the scientific literature. And what he found out was mind-blowing. He couldn't believe that this was happening. So he ended up putting a huge amount. He basically didn't even work. His own independent company was put on hold, and he ended up putting together this report. And this was given to the government last year. And it's not his. They're saying it's his own opinion, but he's basically bringing together international papers and putting them into a report. They're all peer-reviewed, and he's listing out the harm to human health, the environmental impact, and it's breaching almost 30 EU directives. So, he thought this would end fluoride, but again, he's being derided by the expert body. But his report has been used worldwide to end fluoride in other countries like Canada. And to me, the main kind of issue with fluoride, and which was discovered by FitzGibbon and also by other scientists in Harvard, the neurotoxic impact of fluoride. Because the fluoride it basically opens up the blood-brain barrier. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it has the ability to remove the protective membrane in our brain, and it allows heavy metals to be able to be uptaked into the brain tissue, which can result in conditions like Alzheimer's. Now again, we don't have any testing, but the health stats show us that Ireland has the highest level of neurological illness in the world. We have twice the global average in the Republic of Ireland, which is a very scary statistic. And you see people now in their 30s to 50s, there's a huge difference. In fact, 450% higher rates of early onset dementia in the south of Ireland compared to the north of Ireland. And the only difference between us and them is we have fluoride and they're not adding it. We are genetically the same, we're living on the same land, same exposures to radiation, etc. And last year, Harvard scientists, they came out with a study showing that fluoride was associated with the lowering of IQ. And this was based on a lot of studies coming from China. And then the US EPA now lists fluoride as a chemical that has evidence to have developmental neurotoxicity. So all again, it's pointing to the kind of neurotoxic effects. The only thing that the expert body and the Department of Health will actually tell us that it has any side effects is dental fluorosis. I know you can't really, I don't know if you can see there's like little white spots on the teeth. You might see people with that, you might not know what it's caused by, but it's actually a biomarker that your body has been oversaturated with fluoride in the early developmental years. And in fact, if it goes under a microscopic picture, you can actually see small pitted holes in the teeth, so it's actually damage to the cellular structure of the teeth. And that's just a sign, that's your outer skeleton. So if you have that if you're manifesting that on your teeth, you are going to have skeletal abnormalities, which will lead to osteoporosis and fractures in older years. So again, this is something that people can actually look for compensation, because this can cost a lot of money, because people who have dental fluorosis will need a lot of, help and dental work over the years. Their teeth become brittle, so they will have to put in a lot of money.